You know, when I was just a wee lad doing all what I did in the computer world, the graybeards, they came out. They came out at night and they said, "Thou shalt never migrate your database." Because the database is the foundation of everything, right? But we're going to talk really quickly about how to do that in general, but also in particular around Cassandra. Like Avi, I was world famous this and that, but I had a torrid love affair with the terminal, so that was it for me. And I spent a lot of time in healthcare, not as a patient, but hopefully trying to make everybody else better. Nowadays, I work with Scylla, and I talk to customers, talk about how to solve problems. That's what we've been learning about, in the last few days. So we're going to talk about a couple of key dynamics that we can learn from and figure out how to migrate from one to the other. And in particular, the most important thing to know is obviously, what will this have an impact on from where you are to where you're going. And as we've been learning about Scylla these last few days, I'm sure you all know that Scylla is basically very compatible with Cassandra. Basically, all the functionality is in there. Over here, you have a full list of things that we can do. The SS table, the file format is compatible with 2.1. Configuration files, the SQL language, the native protocol, of course, you should all be using the native protocol if possible. JMX management is there. Obviously, the command line, anything you can do in node tool, etc. CQLSH, all of the drivers. Personally, I know some of you might laugh at me, but I'm a big fan of Node, so I do a lot of work in that. And then, of course, because of this, we have great compatibility with the ecosystem. So you've built, you and your teams have built fantastic applications on top of your databases, and you want to make sure that your tooling is going to work post-migration. So the first thing that you want to keep track of course, is the schema. The schema controls basically everything. We're going to talk about how to specifically do that. Forklifting old data. How do we make that happen? Basically, SS table loader. And then we'll delve into how, in specific, you might do dual writes if you were going to do a live migration rather than like an offline migration, and you wanted to keep both systems operating while you were doing this. Finally, there's validation that you can, of course, perform. I like to live on the bleeding edge and leave validation up to my users. And then, of course, fade to black for the old stuff. So, of course, you're reading and writing from your old database. At some point in time, you're going to migrate your schema. Then you're going to implement your data forklift. Now, this is, of course, an offline scenario. The forklift is the SS table scenario. And while you're doing this, you're not writing any new data. At some point in time, this process will finish, and then you'll be able to go back and do some validation on that data. From that point forward, you're going to read data from the new system, write data to the new system, and then fade out the old system. It gets a little bit more complicated with a live migration. The main differentiator, of course, is that you're writing to both the old and the new system at the same time. And this is, of course, where you have to do a little bit of tweaking to your code, but it is completely possible, and obviously it's something that you want to do. When you're talking about multi-data center replication in your old system, your old Cassandra system, and how you might do that, and how you might move that data over into your new system, you basically only have to do it from one cluster. Of course, the multi-data center replication ensures that your clusters are in sync. And then, of course, you're going to move that information into one of your new Scylla clusters, and then your new Scylla cluster will be responsible for replicating that data into the other clusters. CQLSH has a very handy syntax, allows you to export data into a file and then import that data back. So you're going to export various pieces of information from your existing system, and you're going to import it into your new system. There are some caveats with Cassandra 3.x. Of course, we document them all exhaustively on our website. So one of the key things to keep in mind with a dual write scenario is that you want to specifically always use client-side timestamps. A lot of this stuff is fairly straightforward to most folks, but if you're new to the Cassandra world, or if you're considering like how best to do this, the client-side timestamp is the most important thing to keep in mind. Here I'm going to step through a little bit of code very quickly. We're basically going to create 2 different sessions, and they're going to connect to both clusters. This is, of course, an example of the dual write. And here you can see the insert statement is specifically defining using timestamp. And of course, as we've heard a number of times, we're using a prepared statement. This code example is actually on our GitHub repo, and you can take a look at it. It's under Scylla examples. But what we're doing here is we're creating some random values. Most importantly, we're creating that timestamp, and we're putting it into the prepared statement. Here we're just checking to bring it back, a couple of results. And then the most important thing is, how do we validate this? We put it into a result set. We check for whether or not it failed or succeeded. Obviously, we want to make sure they succeed. Both writes succeed to the old and the new cluster. And then this is how you go ahead and do that forklifting with the SS table loader command. And it's going to allow you to specify exactly the key space and the tables so that you can do this on a one-by-one basis. Best practice, just make sure that you clean up your data before you start. Of course, everything is, if it's too big, it takes too long. So make sure you get rid of anything you don't need. And then at the end of the day, give us a call if you need help. We're always there. I'm the person who's probably going to pick up the phone. But definitely be sure to get us involved if you have any challenges. Very simple. Don't listen to the graybeards. You can make it happen. Thanks a lot.